want to share with you an article that I was reading the other day. This is from The Age, and it talks about Australia becoming more godless. Okay, so the census was run a couple of months back. There was the census, and here is one of the things that came out of this census. And I'm going to read this article and just point some things out to you as we go, and then I'm going to give you a biblical perspective. Okay. So it says Australia has become strikingly more godless over the past decade, with the latest census data showing the proportion of self-identified Christians dropping below 50% for the first time, and a soaring number of people describing themselves as non-religious. Now, again, I've had different people share with me on this, and one guy in particular, he's been great. He's been giving me some information, some different statistics that look different to this somewhat. But whether you want to say it's 50% or 40% or 60%, the trend is really what matters. And the trend is declining. Less and less people are identifying as Christians. Okay, so it says that from 2021 census, 44% of Australians now identify as Christian, down from 52% 5 years earlier and 61% in 2011. It says that when they first did the census in 1911, 96% of Australians listed a form of Christianity as their religion. And then it goes on to explain different sectors, whether it's Catholics or Anglicans and so on, and what they were and kind of those declines. Okay, it says in the mid-1960s, less than 1% of people in Australia identified as having no religion. Based on current trends, non-believers, that less than 50%, could overtake Christians as the biggest religious bloc in Australia by the time the next census is conducted in 2026. It says the move away from Christianity accelerated rapidly over the past decade after previously being in a steady long-term decline. So it's saying it's always been dropping, but now it's starting to accelerate. And it shows you here just some graphs, and really what it's saying is that in 96, 71% of people identified as Christians, 17% of people said that they had no religion, and then in 2021, 44% of people said that they were Christian, and 39% of people said that they had no religion. And then here's, they did an interview with a lady, and what she says is quite telling. It says, as a child growing up in Sydney's eastern suburbs, Wright, this lady, was raised in a devout Irish Catholic family whose members attended church every Sunday. Wright felt so connected to her faith that she insisted on attending a Catholic high school, St. Vincent's College in Potts Point. By age 15, however, she began to have an inkling that her religion was no longer for her. So at 15, she had feelings, she had an inkling that this religion doesn't suit her. A few years later, she no longer identified as Catholic. When filling out last year's census, she chose no religion without hesitation. Wright said, religion undoubtedly had a beautiful side, as seen in the comfort her grandfather drew from the promise of an afterlife before he died. But she had seen a more negative side too. There is corruption in the church, the power tripping of priests, she said. Wright said her siblings and many friends had moved away from religion as they grew up. It's this generation, she said. We all grew up with religion, but when you start living your life, you realize you don't identify with it. The church's socially conservative teachings on same-sex marriage and sex before wedlock seem outdated to most people today, she said. The census results show that some non-Christian religions are growing in strength even as they continue to make up a small share of the national population. And it goes on to talk about Hinduism and Islam and so on. So what this is saying is, this lady, as the example, this lady started to live her life. It says around the time when she turned 15, she started to feel, she had an inkling that she didn't identify with her religion. And so here is the interesting point. When we're young, we kind of do what we're told, and we get told what to believe, right? This is right, this is wrong. And it's not until later in life that we begin to question, well, why is it wrong? What is the problem with this? Why can't I do this? And you see her mindset, what she shares, and this is not a criticism of her at all, but it's a common thing that we hear. She says, well, the religion's views on same-sex marriage and sex before wedlock are outdated. So in other words, I've been told things, or my religion tells me things, and that's just old, it's an old perspective. That's not a modern way of thinking. And so as Christians, especially those that are older, and have seen this shift in the mindset or the attitude towards certain norms over the years, they're quite troubled by this, and they say, well, this is not a good thing. It's a negative trend. And I agree, it is a negative trend. But how are we supposed to think about this? The decline in Christianity in Australian society, not what to think, but how are we supposed to think about this, and what is a biblical perspective? Well, let me show you what the biblical perspective is on this, and this will give you maybe a kind of a different thing than what you may have been thinking. So let's go to Matthew 24, 3 to 14. And this is Jesus speaking. He says, "Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?'" Jesus was talking about the last days. "And Jesus answered and said to them, 'Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows.'" And watch, this is really the key to what our mindset should be. Verse 9, "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." So I'm not here to teach on end times today, but what I am saying is that as we get towards the end times, whether the end times are in a week, a month, a year, 100 years, 1,000 years from now, we are moving into the end times, of course, and the love of many will grow cold. Lawlessness will abound. And lawlessness is not talking about legal law the way that we think about it, but in terms of God's law. Lawlessness from God's perspective, not from our legal perspective. There's a lot of things that may be legal, but they're not moral. Okay? Just because the law says you can do something doesn't make it correct. People could legalize all sorts of things that we know are horrible as far as the way that it affects people, and are definitely contrary to God, and yet they're legal. So just because it's legal doesn't make it okay. And that's not what Jesus was referring to. And so in these end times, although we don't want to see it and it is a negative, we expect these things to happen. We expect Christianity to drop. We expect the church to become irrelevant. We expect people to love evil and hate truth. Why do we expect it? We don't welcome it in the sense of it's not a positive for our society day to day, but why do we expect it? We expect it because the Bible tells us to expect it. Jesus told us to expect it. Paul told us to expect it. And so we shouldn't be surprised. Oftentimes we read these articles and we shake our head and we say, it's so sad. But, in some ways, I don't think it's sad. It is sad from the standpoint of you don't want to see that our faith is declining because it brings so much good to people. It brings them hope. Right? And everybody needs God, whether they know it or not. But the reason that I don't think we should be sad is because what's going to happen is society will see the difference between people that are Christians versus people that are Christians in name. And if there's a revival going to come, and people are always praying for revival and praying for things to happen, if there's any sort of revival or any sort of a real awakening within us, okay, of God in society, it's going to come from people that are going to show who Jesus really is and who God really is. In Jesus's time, they were so far removed from God. People don't realize this because, they just read the Bible and they see Jesus in there, kind of shows up one day. But back then, all they had was the scribes and the Pharisees, and their religion was dead. They didn't really have a relationship with God. They just had a bunch of rules. They had all the Old Testament law. And really what they were doing was just doing day-to-day life. And Jesus steps into the picture and he starts to do all those things. He starts to perform miracles in their midst that hadn't happened for hundreds and thousands of years for some of them, right? All the things of the Old Testament with Moses parting the Red Sea and Elijah and Elisha and Noah and all those things that had happened, those were fables to many people. They were stories. They were no longer reality for the Jewish people. And so when Jesus comes on the scene and starts healing people, he cleanses the sick, he casts out demons, he raises people from the dead, he's showing them God's heart, not just in word, but also in application. And so what we are called to do in these last days is to show God's heart. And that's what's going to stir revival in our communities, in our churches, and in our circle of influence. That's really the only thing that's going to do it, because people have had the Bible for thousands of years. And I'm not saying, obviously, the power of the word is supreme, but we have to put the word into action. Faith without works is dead. It's one of the reasons we called what we do mixed with faith, because we need to mix what we hear with faith. And that's why I'm so excited to be sharing with you and being part of this journey with you as we spend time growing in God, because we are part of the group of people that are going to step out and actually make a difference in our society. Just going to church on a Sunday doesn't make you a Christian. A lot of people just see it as kind of paying a debt to God. You know, I'm just going to go on Sunday. God, I went, you know, leave me alone now. The next 6 days, I can do what I want. But on the seventh day, fine, I'll go to church. That's not the way it works. We're supposed to live this out. And, you know, it's not a surprise to me that we're seeing this. And I'll share one more verse with you so you see it from a slightly different angle. And this is in 2 Timothy. And it says in chapter 4, verse 1, I charge you, therefore, before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. The time will come when people won't listen to the gospel, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables or myths or untruths. But you be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of the evangelist, fulfill your ministry. Remember when we read that article and the girl said that, you know, when she started to grow up, she felt that, you know, the teachings of her religion were outdated. Well, what does that mean, outdated? It means that modern society has a certain perspective, a way of thinking, a way of looking at the world. And she doesn't really have a belief system. She's just been told, don't do these things. And so she's living her life a certain way. And it says here in verse 3, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. So if you say people, hey, sex outside of marriage or sex before marriage is not good. There's a lot of reasons why you have problems with that. Same-sex marriage is not good. That's sound doctrine. It says, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. Other translations say they will search for people that say the things that they want to hear. They will search for the teaching that suits them rather than what the gospel says. And so, brothers and sisters, we shouldn't be surprised when we see these things. We shouldn't be surprised when we see churches rising up that condone and promote same-sex marriage. We shouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but we shouldn't be surprised. The Bible tells us to expect it. We shouldn't be surprised when Christians get upset with the church for standing on the word, because Jesus said that the world will hate us. It will hate us because we don't represent the world. We represent Christ. And when you represent Christ, you're going to have persecution, you know? And so really, I want to encourage you, because you are right in the midst of this transformation. You know, Jesus says that in the last days, you know, God will separate the sheep from the goats. And sometimes the sheep and the goats go to the same church. And that's not criticizing anyone. It's just saying that just because you're in church, that's not what makes you a believer. You know, Jesus said, if you continue in my word, then you're my followers. You know, we need to continue in the word, and we need to be strong in that. And we need to be encouraged that God is with us. We are on the right side, even if we are the minority. And Jesus was the minority in his time. The disciples were the minority. And look where it went. Christianity, I'll call it a religion, really its relationship with God. The only reason why it took off is because people saw something different in Jesus and in the disciples than what they saw in the scribes and the Pharisees. And people will come to God if they see you living your life in such a way that not just honors God, but demonstrates that you are who you say you are. And so I want to encourage you, you know, today, as you see things in the media, it's easy to be discouraged. It's easy to feel like, and things just aren't, you know, what's the point? What's the point of sharing the gospel? What's the point of praying for people? You know, the world is just going down. There's negativity. Christianity is declining. I mean, what's the point? The point is that we are here to be the salt and light. That's the point. The point is not to expect society to get better, because it won't. The scripture tells us it won't get better. But, the more dark it is, the more important it is for us to be able to shine that light. So I'm excited to be on this journey with you. I thank you for your attendance at our Bible studies. I thank you for your messages, your emails. I thank you for supporting us financially. I just thank you for being on the journey with us, because that's what it's all about. The meeting of believers is not about going to church, although it's great to go to church. The meeting of believers is just assembling with other like-minded Christians and doing life together as we serve the Lord. So I hope this message has encouraged you, given you a different perspective, not on what to think, but how to think. What is the scriptural perspective on the things that we're facing in our society? So I hope this helped you. Look forward to seeing you next time.